This is part B of the second video for the week. There are very few slides here, but I will be talking at great length on these two slides. On the next slide, we're going to list the desirable criteria for a mass public health screening program, and I'm going to talk to each point. Then on the following slide after that, we're going to explore some possible reasons why screening programs might often not succeed. Here we have a relatively short list, actually, of criteria that we need to think about if we were considering introducing a public health screening program. There are longer lists available, which you're welcome to consult. The first important thing is that it should be an important health problem in the country. In a country where 40% of the population are carriers of the sickle cell gene, premarital screening for the sickle cell gene makes sense. But in South Africa, where the gene is very rare, this does not make sense. There should be, secondly, an accepted treatment available. There's no point in screening for a disease. Then you say to the person who is asymptomatic, by the way, you have this disease, but we can't treat it. So there should be a treatment that's available. And the treatment should be acceptable. We don't want to propose bone marrow transplantation treatment with a high mortality when in fact the disease itself is not all that fatal perhaps. Thirdly, diagnosis and treatment should be available in the country. There's no point in diagnosing cancer of the cervix if we don't offer treatment. Next, there should be a recognizable latent or early asymptomatic stage that we can detect through screening. The next point is that there should be a suitable test or examination, and this test should be acceptable to the population. There's no point introducing a program to screen for tuberculosis where everybody has to be anesthetized and have a bronchoscopy. People are not going to accept this. The next point is that the natural history of the condition should be understood. For example, if in HIV negative women, cancer of the cervix takes 3 years to progress, there's no need for an annual or monthly pap smear. The next point is that there should be an agreed policy on who gets treated as patients, and then the costs of case finding should be balanced with the cost of medical care. If we can treat somebody for a cost of, say, 10,000 Rand, it doesn't make sense to then spend 1 million Rand to find one case. And finally, the case finding should be a continuing process. So we don't just screen once. It's something that has to happen on a regular basis, and the timing of that is related to the natural history. So there's a rational or objective argument as to how frequently people should be screened. We all agree that there should be an evidence base before we introduce a mass screening program. Nevertheless, in spite of the fact that some programs may have a very good evidence base, when introduced, they fail to deliver. And there are a lot of reasons why this might happen, but some of these are listed below. The number one reason, perhaps, is weak administration and poor follow-up of those testing positive, so that many people come in to be tested, and then somehow they never get informed if the test comes back positive. So the yield is actually poor and the program is a flop. There may be a lack of capacity for confirmatory investigations and treatment. So although we're very good at detecting perhaps thousands of people who might have a disease, we then don't have the capacity to test all those people with a more confirmatory diagnostic test. Or if we perhaps do have the capacity to test them, we may not have the capacity then to do the treatment or the surgery that's required. So that could also be a reason for failure, in the sense that the program does not actually impact on the health and well-being of the participants in the scheme. The next point, which is quite a well-described problem, is that the poorest rates of access or uptake are actually amongst those who are most at risk. I recall a time when pap smears were being done more than once a year on women from high income groups and very rarely being performed on women from poor areas. The next problem is that there might be high false negative rates due to poor sensitivity of the test. So although we test everybody and we declare certain people to be disease-free, a very high proportion of those might actually have the disease, so they've been missed. Or alternatively, we might have large number of false positive rates, a test that is oversensitive and diagnoses so many people as being suspected of having the disease, and who then have to go on to have more expensive and invasive diagnostic tests for no reason, because actually these were false positives. So we don't want to have a test with poor sensitivity and no specificity. And finally, there could be over-enthusiastic marketing of tests that have poor performance parameters. One gets used to seeing, for example, at conferences, posters where manufacturers of a new test show the wonderful parameters of the test, and they've actually used an inappropriate study design, and the results are misleading.